People go to restaurants for lots of reasons. For fun, celebration, for family, for lifestyle. What the customer doesn't know is the thousands of details it takes to run a great restaurant. This is a high-risk, high-fail business. It's hard to find great staff. Costs are rising and profits are disappearing. It's a treacherous road and smart operators need a professional guide. I'm Roger. I've started many highly successful, high-profit restaurants that I've now sold for millions of dollars. I'm passionate about helping other owners and managers not just succeed, but knock it out of the park. I created a game-changing system, and it's filled with everything I've learned in over 20 years running super profitable, super fun restaurants. Everything from creating high-profit menu items and cost controls to staff training where your teams serve and sell, to marketing hooks, money-maximizing tips, and efficiencies across your operation. What does this mean to you? More money to invest in your restaurant, to hire a management team, time freedom, and peace of mind. You don't just want to run a restaurant. You want to dominate your competition and create a lasting legacy. Join the Academy and I'll show you how it's done. Welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for joining me. This week's guests are husband and wife restaurateurs that embody the word hospitality. But more importantly, they show us how to reach a balance in our life. You know, it's really hard when you're a restaurant owner, operator, or general manager to find a balance, not be tied to your business. And they talk all about how they stay in their lane. And actually, one of the founders of this restaurant group, Ty, is also a full-time career person at IBM, on top of being a sommelier and being named to wine spectator lists in multiple restaurants of his. And Karen, boy, hospitality background going way back to the beginning. And the two will talk to us about staying in their lane. There's so much in this episode, so you're going to want to stay tuned. Now, on with the episode.
You're tuned in to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Powerful ideas to rock your restaurant. Here's your host, Roger Bodwin.
Rockstars, the busiest time of the year is coming. Is your staff ready for the holiday rush? Well, this year, give your team the gift of Pop Menu AI Answering, a simple solution for phones ringing off the hook. AI Answering handles calls 24/7, 365 days a year, so your staff can focus on in-person guests. Customize your greetings and responses, answer common questions, promote specials and events, and send follow-up links to ordering and reservations. AI Answering handles it all while escalating more complex conversations back to your team. Now, never miss another tasty revenue opportunity. Pop Menu is the marketing technology platform designed to make growing your restaurant easy. Discover more AI restaurant tools that turn your to-do list into an already done list. Request a demo today, and my listeners for a limited time will get $100 off their first month, plus lock in one unchanging monthly rate. Go now to popmenu.com/rockstars. Again, get $100 off your first month at popmenu.com/rockstars. Welcome back, everyone. This is the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Welcome to the show. Ty and Karen, how are you today?
Doing well.
Yeah, doing great. Thanks for having us.
Great to have you here. Again, a really dynamic restaurant group, really interesting story. We're going to get into all of that. But first, tell me about your hospitality backgrounds.
Oh gosh, I can go first if you want. So I grew up in an Italian household who we all love to eat. So in order to eat, you've got to know how to cook, right? So I think I was given my first cookbook at the age of 7 and just fell in love with being in the kitchen and always loved to make people happy with food. That was just kind of ingrained in my DNA. So through the years, trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, went to school for hospitality and went to Virginia Tech, graduated. But then left the industry to kind of have a normal 9-to-5 lifestyle. So did that for about 20 years, and then decided, you know what, I think the one thing that brings me home is the passion of making people happy through food, wine, and hospitality. So it was kind of a natural fit to come back home to this industry for sure.
Oh, I can certainly relate to that. So when you were in school at Virginia Tech, were you on the culinary side? Were you on the sort of hospitality management side? Did you do a little bit of both? How'd that work out?
Yeah, did a little bit of both, which is really great about their program. It lets you dip your toe in the water to figure out kind of where you want to steer your career within the hospitality industry. So, I remember vividly working in our fine dining restaurant on campus, and we all had to do a stint for a semester and learning all of the stations, learning every piece of the restaurant and being like, wow, this is a cool space to be.
That's great. Terrific. Thanks for sharing. How about you, Ty? What's your story?
Yeah, I think a lot like Karen, hospitality has always been a big part of my life. The family, kid born in Queens, New York, always grew up around very diverse and ethnic foods, from Spanish to Italian to Chinese to Greek. So it's always been a big part of my, my youth growing up. And then, trying to get through college and learn how to, be an accountant, be a financial analyst, worked in a number of restaurants, and, the bug just bit me a long time ago, and it's just been with me ever since.
Certainly a business of passion. Now, what's really interesting is you still have a day gig with IBM. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm a partner in our global practice.
So what really intrigues our listeners and myself is how you managed to balance starting a dynamic restaurant group and having, a very intense, challenging job, I would guess, at IBM, and continuing to hold together a marriage and working together with your wife, Karen, and work in the restaurant, which is obviously a stressful enterprise. And how do you keep it all together? How does that work for you?
Yeah. I'm going to let you answer, but I'm going to make a joke real quick because Roger, his beard used to be completely dark before we started this. So you can see how that's gone.
Well, I've worked with my wife, and, I continue to work with her in Restaurant Rockstars, but that's not why my hair is gray. I'm just naturally aging, but thank you for sharing. So go ahead, Ty, tell us how you balance.
Yeah, no, Karen brings a good point. My older brother did say to me that, of all of us brothers, I have the grayest beard, and I am the youngest. So there is something to that, I think, what Karen's saying. Listen, we all have choices in life in terms of how we like to spend our time, what we like to do. And for me, working, my day gig, very intense, very dedicated profession of, IT sales and consulting. But the restaurant business to me is sort of, my passion, right? It's a passion project. And so in terms of, how do you balance, it's not easy, but we do have just some amazing leaders within our organization. And we have some great, investors and friends who also, are very much part of the hospitality family. And so that makes it, achievable. But of course, it does come with its challenges. I think, if we're being completely honest, we've given up some personal, time and commitments to chase our dream, which, is worth every bit of it.
Wow. It's a similar story. I started restaurants 30 years ago, and I had a full-time job at a major ski resort in marketing. I was a marketing director for a major ski resort, saw an opportunity in the town where the ski resort was located. Something struck me, and it was Italian because I was able to live in Italy when I was in graduate school for a whole summer. And I was so influenced by wood-fired pizza on every corner. And I know you guys are starting a pizzeria, but suddenly I moved to this small town, and there's an opportunity, and I've got this full-time job, and I'm thinking of starting a restaurant. And somehow I was able to pull that together. And then obviously after a year or two of working, 6 days a week at the resort and going to the restaurant every single night, I was finally able to make the jump and just did it full time. And so I totally get it. We have something in common here. So tell us about your hospitality group, and tell us the brainchild for it and the story and the timeline, and take us back as far back as it goes. When you got the idea, what was the inspiration, what it was like to start it, and where it is now compared to, what your original vision was. That's a lot to unpack, but take us there.
Yeah. Well, I'll get us started here, but if you look over my shoulder, you'll see a picture of both Karen and I. This wasn't even set up this way, but the picture of Karen and I sitting on Dow Mountain. And so every year before we started to get into the venture of running Bene Hospitality Group and opening, San Picconcino Wine Bar, we used to go to wine country, every year, sometimes twice a year, to go enjoy some of the things that we really enjoy, which is number one, wine, but two, just traveling and being away and having time together. And so we were sitting on the side of Dow Mountain enjoying a bottle of Soul of wine and one of our favorite wines. And as we were sitting there thinking about, kind of, our journey through life, how we've come together, what we really enjoy. We had just moved to Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, a sort of a budding, growing kind of, community that was lacking maybe some more diversity in ethnic foods, which has come a long way now, right? I think, our community is not starved for ethnic cuisine as much as it maybe was at the beginning. But we just decided that, this was an opportunity for us to do something we really enjoy and love. And it was never about the money. It was never about, growing this big, giant restaurant group or anything like that. It was really just about connecting to our DNA, which is hospitality and people. And they're on top of that wine, which is, my passion. And we decided to really start getting serious about planning and potentially finding a spot. We spent about a year looking for a spot. Nothing really, sort of triggered our emotion or our selection process to say this is the one. And then, sure enough, the space where Savvy is today became available, and we said, "Hey, this is it." And we decided to jump in, head first.
Timing is everything, isn't it?
Always. And it's funny, when I think about the Savvy space, we were initially looking for, like 2,000, 2,500 square feet, but I feel like the universe always gives you what you can handle. So
Wow.
The universe delivered 5,000 square feet to us. So we were like, okay, here we go. But it has proved to be an amazing spot. We opened just prior to COVID. So we opened November of 2019. Hit our stride, and we're doing great. And then all of a sudden, COVID hit. So we had to get very innovative, very, very fast, and pushed us into areas that were potentially out of our comfort zone and forced us to make business decisions to keep the ship afloat. So, we were very lucky about, with our location. Italian food translates very well to takeout delivery. We also have a very large outdoor patio that gave us flexibility to serve guests in an outdoor setting. So, through all of that, there were a ton of silver linings that really helped us get through.
Wow,
So
isn't it amazing?
timing is everything.
Yeah, it's timing, and it's also fate sometimes too. Had you found that 2,025 square foot space, life would have been entirely different. So, wow, what challenges that must have been, and how resilient this industry is for our listeners that obviously are still running restaurants and involved in this industry, because it devastated everything that we knew prior. And interestingly, just like yourselves, I was out of the business for many years and then had the brilliant idea of buying another restaurant just before the pandemic. So I went through everything you went through, and I hate the word pivot now because it's been so overused, but that literally happened 5 or 6 times just to make the place survive and just totally transition from this idea to this idea to this idea and adopt the new technologies and make everything work. And so I know our audience can relate to what you're saying. Tell us about what's the secret of your success? I mean, you mentioned the word hospitality, you mentioned the word leadership, and I'll dive into both of those, but what is really the magic formula for Bene Hospitality and your current success right now?
I think I've got a couple ideas, and you can follow up on this. I think number one, you have to have passion. Number two, you can't just say, oh, hey, I love to cook or I love to be hospitable and think that, a business plan is going to fall into place around that. So you have to be very methodical and maniacal about what your business plan is and stick to that. But also know that you are going to have to pivot, right? And overcome challenges along the way. I think the other piece of it is surrounding yourself with a strong team, surrounding yourself with people that may not be great in the areas that you are. But I would come back to the biggest thing to me is passion. You have to have passion for this business, or else you're going to become very tired very fast.
That's an excellent answer. Ty, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many little things that really support what Karen said. But I think it comes back to you have to have grit, you got to have passion, and you can't be afraid to try something new. You got to continuously experiment, explore, and find ways to give people what they want. And in a business like ours, it's hard to always do that and be profitable, right? But it's getting it's getting inventive, it's getting creative, it's using technology. But at the end of the day, it's finding what do people want and what are some creative ways that we can give them what they want and still, run a very profitable business.
That's a really interesting point you make about experiments, because they happen all the time. And you need a certain amount of risk tolerance depending on how risky the idea is. There could be a huge payoff in return on investment, or it may seem like a great idea, either in theory or on paper, and then you try it and it could end up costing you quite a bit of money and setting you back. And everyone is different in terms of the risk tolerance. But when you're in this business, you've got to be resourceful and creative. And do you guys find yourselves not very risk averse and you're more willing to take chances? And after you answer that, I'm going to ask you about anything that you experimented with that you thought was a great idea that maybe didn't work out for our audience's benefit.
I'll let Ty answer the risk question.
Okay.
I think by nature, I'm very much a risk taker and a very methodical, very well thought out, very calculated risk taker. Because I always feel that if you're not taking risks, maybe the most risky thing to do is to do the status quo. Right? Because there's plenty of organizations, plenty of folks who can just keep doing what we've always done and be successful at it. And if you really want to be successful in a different fashion, you have to take risk. And again, it's not risk of, hey, let's go open this up in the middle of the desert like they did in Vegas, right?
Sure. And look at what it turned out. But the original people with that idea didn't work out so well for, but ultimately look what happened. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. But, but I think it's, it's just experimenting with small experiments, and you experiment to learn. And even if you don't succeed, the ability to take away some learnings from it and maybe incorporate it into a new idea that comes along in the future, makes that initial experiment very much well worth it. In terms of, maybe where we've experimented and haven't been successful, nothing honestly jumps to mind, although I'm sure there's a million different things. This jet lag from Sydney is probably not helping my brain.
That's right. You just jetted in from a very long trip. Oh, you're doing remarkably well. I'd be sleeping right now.
Espresso.
But I will say, here's a case where we had a very successful experiment and maybe not as successful trying to replicate it. Mm-hmm. And that's good. our wine club, right? So one of the things I've always, we talked about every year we would go to a different place. Mostly Napa, Paso Robles became two of our favorite places. Paso is actually probably our favorite place to go to in terms of wine country. And because it just has a very hospitable, very, non-pretentious way about it. So when we opened Savvy, one of the things I always wanted in a wine club was something that felt like, hey, I'm in control of what wine I get. There's too many times you join a wine club or you're in a wine program and they tell you every month the 2 or 4 or 6 bottles that you're getting, which is cool. And I completely understand why they do. But I always wanted to let folks try everything and then let them pick which 2 or 4 or 6 bottles they wanted. Now you got to be incredibly accurate in, your data and have a good understanding of, are we going to be able to make this happen? And, how many bottles are we going to need? So, again, back for technology, using a lot of data and analytics to figure out, what are the trends is really important. So, we were very successful with that at Savvy. We had 500 members. We never planned on it getting really that big, right, for a restaurant. But, it was very successful. We opened our second venture, which is a Spanish gastro bar, and we brought that concept there. And what we found is that people, aren't as interested in the wine club at Samba as they are at Savvy. And so now we've had to kind of pivot and think to ourselves, okay, maybe there's another way, another experiment we can do to really make it, much more in line with the Samba concept versus, the Savvy concept.
So that's wow, there's so much to talk about here. So you're a sommelier, and obviously you're an oenophile before you got really in depth. I mean, you mentioned that, that piece of art behind you. Are you self-taught? Did you go to school for this? Did you learn to be a sommelier, or did you just really dive into wine and read Spectator and try obviously lots of different wines? And then I know what I like it, but then you branched out. I mean, I don't want to speak for you. Tell us the whole story of how you got such
it's a
in-depth
good
wine
question.
knowledge.
It's a good question. Well, I'll tell you where the bug first hit me. So, as we talked about earlier, when I was a young lad going through college, working my way through college, I worked at a 4 or 5 star resort called Turnberry Isle, and we had sommeliers there, a lot of great wine, an amazing cellar. And the sommelier, I was working one night. Kenny Rogers came in, ordered a couple bottles of Merceau for him and his team. It was after a concert that they had down in South Florida. And as he always was, he was a very generous person. He ordered some extra bottles, knowing that they weren't going to use it, finish them or drink them, and gave them to the staff. I mean, just an incredible human, as nice of a guy as I think I've ever met from a celebrity perspective. And at Turnberry, I met, quite a few.
I can imagine. Yes, you would.
Yeah. And I had a glass of Merceau that night. It wasn't a wine drink at the time. I was, I just turned 22 years old. Just came back from the military. And the bug just bit me. And at that point, I wanted to learn everything I could about wine, because I couldn't get the feeling or the memory or that, sort of that experience out of my brain. And so I was constantly pestering and asking questions of the sommeliers and stuff. And for the next 20 years, in the business world, I spent a lot of my time looking at wine lists, entertaining, and just always wanting to learn about wine and what made that juice so spectacular, or, in some cases, very, very mediocre. And I wanted to understand what the drivers were behind that. So I have my personality is one of always wanting to learn, always looking at data, observing. And so wine became my kind of playground to feed that itch.
So when you're in that position and you have that extensive knowledge, you obviously need to know wines around the world, but you've mentioned numerous trips to either Napa or Paso Robles and that sort of thing. And Karen, you've got Italian roots. Have you ever been to Tuscany and, toured the vintage, the different, vintners there and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's very funny because I have been to Italy and kind of did the standard tour of Italy to hit all of the places that you're supposed to hit, right? But I want to go back and spend more time in the areas that I truly fell in love with and captured my heart, which Tuscany would certainly be one of them, obviously. And if you would have said to me, 6 or 7 years ago, what kind of wine do you love to drink? I would have told you, a big bold cab from California or from Paso and my palate has expanded significantly to fall in love with so many Italian wines. And the cool thing about Italian wines is, for me, they're very value-based too. So you don't have to spend a ton of money to get a great bottle of wine.
Yeah, and, this is true.
And I think so many people, including myself at one point, were very intimidated by Italian wines. Sometimes when you read the label, you're like, is that the grape? Is that the vineyard? Is that what is this? What am I drinking? But I think once you kind of get over that and feel more comfortable with Italian wines, my God, there is so much to explore. And obviously everything, they pair really well with food because we're Italian. So,
I remember, so much about my wine experience in Italy wasn't about ordering bottles of wine. It was about getting the liter bottles of the house wine or whatever the local winery was down the road. And they were excellent wines. They were great values. And it was all part of the experience of, sharing a liter with someone you were with, or even, strangers at a family style table, but that was all part of the culture. And it was really incredible. And that's so much different here than in America, where you would order a bottle of wine and the house wine is not necessarily it's a value, but it's not necessarily a great glass or, where it comes from, that sort of thing. Yeah. So, European cultural differences obviously being what they are, but and now you've got a Spanish concept as well. And you're saying that the wine club isn't quite what it was at Savvy. Is that because it's heavily, tilted towards Spanish wines, Tempranillos, that sort of thing? Or is there a fairly diverse list where you're just wondering why? I mean, we got plenty of choices here, but people aren't picking up on it. What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I think it's more the vibe than anything, right? It's, Savvy is much more elegant, yet casual. We have full-time sommeliers. It just lends itself, I think, to more of that tasting and sort of the the journey of tasting different wines. Whereas Samba is a little bit more, like I said, gastro bar like, and so it's one of those cases where I think it's more of an American thing, right? Because if you took Samba and put it in Barcelona, people would beat down the doors to come and try wine there, as well as have cocktails, and and obviously our culinary is off the charts there. But it doesn't feel like a place you'd want to maybe drink some great wines all the time, right? So it's really more of a for those that have been to Europe, we actually get a lot of comments of like, oh my God, I've been to Barcelona. This is like I'm back in Spain. And so I think it's a little bit more of that than anything. It might be kind of like the area where we're at. It's a bit more, everyday, very casual than it is, big city, which is the charm and what we love about this area. So it just may take a little time to kind of, to get that off the ground. So we're certainly not going to stop doing our wine club, because, we do another wine club a mile down the street. So it doesn't cost us anything. Right. But what we want to do is just make sure the experience is really within, the lines of what we're trying to achieve. To your question, though, about Spain, and, we do a lot of Spanish wines, Argentinian wines, Chilean wines, but domestics as well. And we'll do some Italians in there also. But I do think that, it's more of the space than it is probably, the wines per se.
Well, I'm really glad you brought it up, because I love to emphasize to the audience the importance or the power from a marketing standpoint that a club has. And obviously, we've all been in sports bars or those bars that have mug clubs. And I had a mug club for many, many years that grew huge in my largest restaurant. And then suddenly the lady said, well, what about us? It's like, what about a wine club? So that became a huge opportunity because sure, lots of ladies drink beer too, but certain great customers asked for a wine club, and then the wine club grew, and we had really beautiful glassware, and the pours were larger, and there was certainly value added. But one of the things that we noticed was if customers used to come in maybe twice a month or 3 times a month, maybe, now they were coming in several times a week because they felt this sort of loyalty or affinity or exclusivity because they belonged to this club, and then they had their friends recommend to join, and the thing sold itself. So it's a huge opportunity. And I definitely think it's got legs for all of your concepts. And it's just a hook. I love hooks. You can't have too many hooks in this business. So I'm really glad you brought up the wine club. Let's talk about the different concepts. Do you cross promote them from a marketing standpoint? Do you want your guests to experience all your different concepts, and then whether they develop a favorite or they kind of rotate through and that sort of thing? How do you do that? Is that part of your strategy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just talking about Savvy and Sama and their similarities and differences, we basically, Savvy is our season, the menu changes seasonal, and we have, 4 wine Spectator awards, and, we've been recognized for, probably one of the top service restaurants, in the area, and Charleston is very much hospitable, very high-end restaurant, foodie kind of town. So for us to kind of achieve those awards in this town says a lot about, our team and staff and really what they believe, hospitality is. And then you have Samba, which again, more gastro bar, more fun, energetic. It's okay to laugh really loud and have a great time. And maybe we do some pour on shots, out of the decanter where, you just pour it straight in your mouth, or you could use the glass, whatever people prefer. And then you get, our Woodhaven pizza concept, which is very near and dear to my heart. I'm a pizza fanatic. As much as I love wine, I probably love pizza almost twice as much.
No, It's New York style. Did you grow up in New York, and why did you decide New York style pizza?
No, I'm from Queens, New York.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. You can always take the kid out of Queens, but you can't take the Queens out of the kid, is, sort of what I always say.
Yeah.
And, I just, New York City style pizza is different, right? And so many folks, they talk about New York style pizza. And, the challenge for me was always like, well, when you talk about New York style pizza, are you talking about Rochester? Are you talking about Buffalo? Are you talking about, upstate New York, where they may have a different take on what pizza is like? And there's no right or wrong answers. But when you think of New York City style, right, it is that thin, crunchy, savory, and just an amazing sauce that just brings a pie together where you almost don't even need toppings, but you throw toppings on it after that, and it's even more amazing. So kid from Queens, from originally born in Sunnyside, raised in Woodhaven, and pizza's always been near and dear to my heart, and we're trying to replicate that here in South Carolina with our partners who are both from Jersey, and one of our partners spent 40 years in the business of pizza with his family. And so, we're trying to bring that to this area and let people enjoy that.
So the name really comes from the neighborhood then.
Yeah.
Oh.
Woodhaven does. So I'll tell you a little story if it's okay to tell a story
please.
about how Woodhaven started. Woodhaven Pizza was probably born 50 years ago, but it was born 50 years ago in my mind. Right. It is just now coming to physical form. And, Woodhaven Pizza to me is the memory of my mom taking me. Now, as you may or may not tell from this podcast, I have a hard time staying on track. Right. My brain is going a million miles an hour, which is why the restaurant business is perfect for me, as well as the consulting and technology business, because it's always changing. And I love just, observing and changing my pace and gears. But my mom used to take me, if I was good for that week in second or third grade, she'd take me down to the corner store. We'd take one of my Hanes white T-shirts, right, or Fruit of the Loom or whatever. It was probably Fruit of the Loom, actually. And for $1, you can get, an iron-on, sort of, logo, which I get Boston, Zeppelin, AC/DC, right? They just iron on for $1.
So and a classic rock fan too, Ty?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Some of my favorite bands you just mentioned. So
yeah,
Thank
absolutely. And so after that, we'd walk across the street to a pizzeria. It was underneath the train, over the overhead train tracks.
Oh, sure.
And so, trains and, obviously we take the trains into the city, from Queens, New York. But on Woodhaven Boulevard, we'd walk across, get a slice. And that's my very first memory of pizza, right? I'm sure I've had it, long before that. But there was something about that one day where we took that white T-shirt. I was good that week. I wasn't disruptive in class. They ironed on my patch. It was a Boston T-shirt. I still remember it to this day. Walked across, got a square grandma pie, and I was hooked on the pizza bug ever since mentally.
Gotcha. Mine was New Haven style pizza because my aunt, my mother's sister lived in New Haven, and we went there all the time to visit when I was a kid growing up, and pizza was huge in New Haven. So I remember that being kind of an early influence as a kid. But I also had relatives in the Bronx, and I remember staying there and having the overhead trains passing right over. So it's like I'm reliving your childhood and mine just through your conversation. But yeah, pizza is a wonderful thing, and obviously it's got so many different variations and all that. And I obviously built my businesses on wood-fired pizzerias, and I was all influenced by, like I said, trips to Italy and living there. But it's such an amazing food, but it's such a competitive market segment also. Do you find that there's lots of pizza competition in your area, or not so much?
Oh, no, absolutely. But I think if you start talking about New York City style pizza, there's probably not as much competition.
I'm sure that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you know, if you've been, New Haven, talk about competition, right? Probably 3 of the greatest pizzerias in the world are within a block of each other. Right. So talk about competition. Right. But I think our competition isn't other pizza places necessarily. I think it's, getting folks away from maybe some of the chains. Right. The folks that don't treat pizza like a craft, because
good point.
Pizza is a very simple product, but it's not easy. And that's what gets lost. Right. The time you have to take to really nurture the dough, right? And use the right flour and let it sit for 2 days. Right?
And the quality of the water as well.
It's very debatable.
Okay, tell us about that.
Very
Water, we
debatable.
had excellent water quality and we made our own dough fresh every day from scratch. So I totally get what you're talking about. It's a time-honored process. You got to put the craft into it. It's not just about, slapping something together and calling it pizza. You're absolutely right about that. But keep
Yeah.
going. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. It's funny you mentioned the water thing. I mean, of course, right? I mean, 60 to 65, in some cases, 70% of the product is water. So the water has to be good. But there was this old, what I would call myth of, hey, you can't make great New York City style pizza outside of New York City because of the water. And it's just not true, right? But you do have to understand that your water needs to be clean. It needs to be flavorful from a mineral perspective. And so it has to be that very crisp water. And in New York, it's great because you could open up a tap and get that, right? Whereas maybe in South Carolina or Florida or other places, you can't just do that, right? So we actually filter all of our water to make sure we get a quality of water, that is similar to what you would expect to get, from the New York City, water authority. But and I lost my train of thought, but
I do have something to add there too.
Okay.
Go ahead, Karen.
This was actually, I think, born while you've been traveling the last couple of months. So we've got one of our chefs at Savvy, and we do Neapolitan style pies at Savvy. And I love to watch him teach some of our new cooks that come in how to properly make a pizza. And with every move of his hands, he says, respect the crust, respect the crust. And it gets this mantra into your head. So I always love to watch him train other folks because he's teaching them about the art of making a pizza, right? It's not just throwing it all together. Like Ty said, it is respecting the product in the final piece. So.
Oh, I did remember where I was going with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Keep on rolling.
It was, when they were talking about the water, I think they didn't pay the respect to the people who actually cared about the craft, right? They made it about, oh, you can't do it because of the water. No, it's because you had generations of pizza makers who understood how to respect the craft, right? How to feed your dough, how to create the right environment and understand the variables that happen, right? It gets hot, it gets cold, it gets humid,
Mm-hmm.
It gets dry, right? And sometimes, right, humans who we're touching the dough, right? Some days we have good days and some days we have bad days, right? And what made those pizzaiolos so great is that they knew how to separate their personal life from the craft, and the craft almost became more important than anything. And so, they were just very in tune with the environment around them. And they actually put a lot of, care and time into those pizzas. And that's what made them great. The water's important, but it wasn't the water. It was the person behind it.
I totally agree with you. And it's, we mentioned it being such a time-honored tradition, but, in Italy specifically, it's such a passed down from generational thing, and it's a revered position to be a pizzaiolo. And I'm sure you've been to some of these restaurant shows here, especially I'll be speaking at the Pizza International show in Orlando next month, and they have major competitions right on the stage. The dough throwing and the pizza making, and I'll be eating a lot of pizza at that show. But you know what I'm saying? But it's a tradition, but it's also, very much a prestige thing over there in Italy. If you're a generational member of a family, that it's been passed down, and the recipes and all that. And that's the craft. That's part of the craft. That's part of the passion we've been talking about. And it shouldn't just be about pizza. It's about every dish that any restaurant makes. It should be about the craft, the quality, the pride, and the passion behind it, and making sure that every dish, is as perfect as it can be. And you want your guests to absolutely love everything that you make. So
amen.
That's what a business is about. Doesn't matter what the concept of the cuisine, but I'm glad we're talking about this. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about your individual roles at Bene and, how you guys stay in your lane, or if you don't sometimes and kind of overlap a little bit. Tell us about that. What are you each responsible for on a daily basis?
You want me to try that one? So I always say Ty is the Bene Hospitality Group visionary. And I always do this. He is an idea guy. And as you can tell, his mind is always going a million miles an hour. And I remember one night coming home from the restaurant, he had left just slightly before me. And I remember walking into the house and he was decompressing after a long day, but yet he was watching something on YouTube about how to build a a database. I don't even remember, but it was like, I'm like, man, you got to just relax. Like, but he's constantly learning, right? Constantly has
My
these
wife
ideas.
is like that. My wife is constantly, if she's not, I say this to my friends, if she's not rearranging the furniture 3 times a week and listening to 100 different podcasts and reading books on Audible, it's like I'm a constant sponge for knowledge, is what she would say. And it sounds like Ty's that way.
Absolutely. And it's all about balance, right? So not
Yeah.
that I don't
Okay.
want to learn, but for me, I tend to compartmentalize things a little bit more. So Ty
Uh-huh.
is definitely that guy. I am, gosh, I hospitality is just, it comes very naturally to me. So for me, what I love to do is be with our staff, be with our guests, and just make sure that the one phrase I always use is, if a guest has walked out our front door and they haven't felt something, we have not done our job. It is up to us to make them feel like they can actually take the night off. They can sit back and relax and let us care for them for that night. We need to make them feel seen and heard and remembered. And we have over our bar at Savvy is a phrase in Italian that means enter as friends and leave as family. And we truly do believe that that is really our bottom line mission in this organization or in this hospitality group. And back to the question that you had asked about, do we cross market and do things overlap within the industry or within our hospitality group? Hospitality is the one thing that is the golden thread, right? So whether you come to Savvy, whether you come to Samba or Woodhaven Pizza, that the warmth and the care that we put into the food and the experience is going to be the same at every concept. It's certainly, there's different levels of, Savvy being a little bit more upscale and Samba feeling more like a gastro bar, and Woodhaven's going to be, super casual with a big TV wall and a place you can come and watch the game with your family. But how you're going to feel when you leave that restaurant that night. And so that's kind of what I call the golden thread.
That's excellent. Awesome. That's terrific. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about, is there a typical day for either one of you? Is every day completely different?
I think every day is pretty darn different. I think, yeah.
Yeah, every day is different, but if you stretch it out over a long enough period, there's what I would call daily archetypes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Certain days are gonna feel the same as others. They just may be stretched out, right? And so you'll have some days where we have to be, immensely structured and really think about every step we take that day, because it is jam-packed. We've got a lot of deliverables that need to come around. It may be the end of the period or the end of the quarter, or tax season is upon us, or whatever, or a new menu rollout. And then there's days where, it's lighter, because we have just gone through a period of a lot of change or a lot of process implementation. And so, I would say every day is definitely different, but there's certainly archetypes that we have to start to recognize. And recognize them when those different archetypes come into play, that it's not forever, it's just for that day or that week, and that when the archetype of a more casual day comes along, that we take a step back, let the team do their thing, and we take a step away and sort of reboot and recharge. It's critically important. But yeah, every day's different. I mean, you're in the business, you understand that. And to use a Mike Tyson phrase, everyone's got a plan to get punched in the mouth. And some days you wake up and you think it's going to be an archetype day of a casual day, and you get punched in the mouth. And you just have to pivot. You have to have a lot of grit and, just keep pressing forward.
Yeah, some days you're the bug and some days you're the windshield.
That's right. That's right.
Let's talk about leadership. I love that word. And I'm on a personal mission to sort of shift the mindset of this industry between the word leader and the word manager. And I know that you know what that means, but let's talk about your leadership philosophies in your business and what the onboarding and training is all about, what your hospitality philosophies are that you impart upon your staff, and how you develop a team culture, or what your company culture really is. Let's talk about how all those things sort of blend together.
Yeah, I'll take that one first. I'd love for you to sort of
please
kick in. But and this is where you see Karen and I sort of working together, as I'm more of here's the structure, here's what it looks like. And as creative as I am, and as everywhere in a conversation, I do have a very methodical structure to things like leadership. And for me, when I think of leadership or I think of culture, those two things are very much, intertwined, because everybody in the restaurant needs to be a leader in some form or fashion. Some people are leading in the terms of people. Some people are leading in terms of product, and some people are leading in terms of what I call place, right? So we all have a leadership, slant to us. In some cases, it's just leading through the job that you're doing, but interacting with other folks. In other cases, it's getting your team ready to go, run a marathon, just kind of, thinking that way. But for me, it's, a good leader has to communicate. You got to collaborate. You got to contribute, right? So if you think about those three things, communication, we all get, right? It's important. And, in the restaurant business, things are moving a million miles an hour. Communication is always something everybody struggles with, right? How do you keep everybody, in the know, right? Collaboration, right? Working well with other departments, right? Working well with other leaders, working well even with other restaurants and other businesses, right? Is really important. But in our culture, we talk about, from a leadership perspective, just collaborating. So you got to communicate, you got to collaborate, and then you got to contribute, right? At the end of the day, if you're not contributing, your team is not gonna look at you and say, I need to follow him, her, they, whomever. So contribution is really, really important. And when you do those three things, and I always say that, you also have to be present, right, is another piece of that, right? So if you're collaborating, communicating, contributing, and you're present with your team, your culture will automatically begin to take shape. And so, I always call it the 4 C's, right? The 3 C's equals the fourth one. And that's how you get your, your culture.
I love it. Give me that again. It was collaboration. Give me the C's.
Yeah.
I want to remember that.
Communication.
Yep. That's right.
Collaboration.
Of course.
Contribution. And if you do those 3 things right, your culture will take care of itself.
Love that. That's fantastic. That was a great piece to add to this. Thank you very much. What do you have to add to that, Karen?
Well, I certainly can't compare to, I got to come up with some sort of acronyms. For me, it's, this industry is about people, right? So I think treating people like people, holding them accountable, but also treating them like humans. And, I think for years and years in this industry, I hate to say it, but in the food and beverage industry, a lot of the folks working in this industry were treated like second-class citizens, or they weren't, weren't given health benefits, or they weren't given PTO, and that's not the case. We've got several, these folks are talented individuals, and we're lucky to surround ourselves with them. So I think treating them like humans, treating them how you would like to be treated, and guiding them and coaching them. But then also at the same time, you can't be afraid to make difficult decisions. And one thing that Ty mentioned to me that will always stick with me when we first set out on this path was I was struggling with making a decision to let somebody go. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this because it was just very difficult for me to do in my skin. But he said, if you think about all of the families that we are responsible for as owners of this company, we have 40, whatever it was at the time, 45 families depending on the success of this restaurant. And we can't let one person bring that down. And so that has always stuck with me and has made what typically could be a very difficult decision very easy. So you have to be able to get past that and not be afraid to make those difficult decisions.
Yeah. And just on that point, just to kind of close that out, is that, there are times, to Karen's point, it's a hard decision to make, but there's a bigger, philosophy around why you have to make that decision. But it doesn't mean that we don't care and love that person. It just means that maybe Bene Hospitality Group isn't the right place for them.
Of course.
Right.
Yep. The fit is so important, vitally important, because it's a chemistry amongst the team. And the end result is the guest notices this is either a well-oiled machine and the team fit well together and the hospitality is present or it's not. And one person, like you said, Karen, can bring the whole thing down. So I guess the key point here is accountability must be present in order for leadership to really work. Is there anything special you do to ensure accountability? Is it really required in your organization? Do people have very clear ideas of what the expectations are and they all meet those things? Do you have job descriptions of performance reviews and recognition and rewards? Like, how do you do it?
Hey, listen, it's a really great question. And so in my daytime business, obviously I spend a lot of time either managing teams or talking to, C-suite individuals on, how do they, change their business. The one thing that I've learned, when I spent a couple of decades at Accenture, and the one thing that I learned during that time is that sometimes the process being too rigid can actually reduce your ability to create value. And what I mean by that is that sometimes you need a guided path, right? A lighted path versus fences, electrocuted on both sides, and you have to stay on that path. Sometimes you need to veer off the path a little bit. So we've always been, it's a very delicate balance, because what I'll say is that in our industry, everybody wants to know, what's my exact job and what I exactly have to do. But we're dealing with humans, right? Every day. And every day that human that comes through the door to come into one of our restaurants, they may be a different human than they were when they came last week. Right. Oh, yeah. And so having the same strict responsibilities and process can actually cause that same human in two different sort of mindsets or states of emotional being to have two completely different experiences if we do everything exactly the same way every single time. And that's hard in the restaurant business. And I get that. So we try to balance between having what I would call core principles of how we operate, and that, versus having, hey, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And it's been very challenging for us. I'll be completely honest, right? It's been very challenging, but it has been something where I've tried to stay as steadfast as I can, and Karen has as well, in terms of, we're not going to prescribe to everybody how you and what you say when you interact with a guest, but here are your core principles. And at the end of the day, the most core principle is to make that guest feel heard, seen, and make sure they understand that we're here to, the product that we serve is hospitality. The food, the beverage, the drinks, the decor, that's all sort of the framework around it. But at the end of the day, the core picture we're trying to paint is one size fits one hospitality.
I love it. That's beautiful. Let's shift gears yet again, and let's talk about inflation and rising costs and volatility of, food prices in the markets and supply chain issues. And a lot of that is gone, but a lot of it's still there. What are those challenges that you're currently facing, and how do you maintain margins, and who's in charge of your finances at Bene?
Well,
you're the finance guy. Okay.
By trade, I'm a finance guy, but I'm also, my day job, I'm more of what they call a deal maker. And so I'm thinking about, how do we create a deal, but also make sure it's profitable, right? So in our business, obviously I'm doing the same thing, right? How do we create an offering, but also make sure it's profitable? Inflation, I think last year was much, much more of a problem. I would say inflation right now is non-existent, right? From a product perspective. I think there's still pockets of it, but I think we're now back into a normal cycle of, if you are very thoughtful in your procurement and you're really looking at what products you're bringing in and what items, and you're negotiating, with your suppliers, I think inflation has tamed. In some cases, just recently, I did a whole overhaul of our Buy the Glass program, right? And these are all great wines. But what we're seeing is that they're seeing softness on their side, right? So we said, hey, listen, if we consolidate our purchasing, through you, can we get, a better deal? And in 99 cases out of 100, and literally we have probably between 2 or 3 concepts, 100 different SKUs, we're seeing a lot of flexibility. And what we're trying to do is create relationships with our suppliers where it's a win-win for both sides, right? And we take that very seriously. But inflation from a product perspective, it's completely tamed. In fact, I'm seeing more disinflation than inflation at this point. From a
I
people
think,
perspective, go ahead.
yeah, you're making a really, really valid point here. And I'm glad you're bringing that out, because there's obviously savvy operators out there that are really bottom line oriented, and they've got economies of scale, and they shop around different products of comparable quality, and they're really analyzing the invoices and the numbers, and like you said, smart procurement and all those things. And then there are those operators just sort of flying by the seat of their pants, wondering why their margins are less than 5%, and and there's a big spread in this industry. But I love that point you're making, because somebody, if it's not you as the owner, needs to be very bottom line oriented and make very smart choices and know what the critical numbers are, and know that taking inventory is important, and your prime costs, keeping them in your sweet spot and in line. And there's so many operators that are missing those key points. And costing out your menus regularly to know what you're making, what your margins are on every dish, and where's the profit lie in your business. So thank you for sharing that. That was really, really important. Let's wrap this up and talk about what's the future of Bene look like. You're going to keep opening up new restaurant concepts and, keep going in hospitality with multiple concepts and cuisines and all that. What's your end goal?
Yeah, I think if you're going to ask Karen the question, she'd be very content kind of where we're at right now. I think, but our group, right, we have a number of passionate investors who are also operators with us, right? We may at this point own a fair amount of the equity within the Bene Hospitality Group, but we're always looking for partners, and the partners that we're bringing on are partners who want to expand, want to grow. And so we're looking to maybe take a slight step back by bringing in more talent at the ownership level, so that we can have more work-life balance. Because over the last 3 years, we haven't had a lot of work-life balance.
I can imagine. I know that feeling.
Yeah. But the plan is to continue to grow. I mean, we're looking at opening a number of Woodhaven pizzas across the Southeast. And then as we start to open those Woodhaven pizzas, when we see an opportunity for a Samba or a Savvy, we'll slot those in as well, because we do think there's some scale opportunities and some cross marketing that is important. And so, we're going to take it sort of day by day, and just keep assessing the environment, and again, giving the people what they want. And if we can give the people what they want with one of our three concepts, we'll continue to do that.
Well, you both are inspired restaurateurs, leaders, and what you're doing for the industry is wonderful. And I think you've offered lots of key nuggets of information to our audience that they can obviously put into practice themselves. So thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks, Roger. Appreciate it.
That was the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Everyone can't wait to see it in the next episode. So please stay tuned and stay well. Thanks, Ty and Karen. I so enjoyed having you as guests. You certainly know what the foundations of hospitality are all about. You've built a strong company culture. You not only are strong financially, you're strong with leadership, but most importantly, you teach us that there is a possible balance in your life. When you run a restaurant, you don't have to be tied to it. You can literally just use your expertise and put others in charge and just truly lead a business forward and still have a balance in your life. But it's evident that you're passionate about the business, and we really appreciate your sharing your experiences with us. So thank you so much. Can't wait to see you next time. Listen, from one restaurateur to another, and I hope you GMs out there listening as well are paying attention. Marketing should never be an experiment. Oh, I tried this or I tried that. No, any of your valuable dollars that you spend on marketing should absolutely be trackable. You should know exactly where the business is coming from and that it's driving return on your investment. You spend a certain amount of money, you want to make far more money in return from that marketing, if you can track it. So pay attention. My friend Dyson runs a business called The Birthday Club, and his program is done for you because we know that everybody dines out on their birthday. It's a tradition. It's a celebration. But not only do they not come in by themselves, they bring many friends with them. They usually have free spending and large check averages. It's very profitable business. So why leave it to chance? Why let your competitors get all the birthday business? So again, The Birthday Club is a done-for-you program. All you have to do is check out www.jointhebirthdayclub.com/birthdayrockstar. It's a great program. If I still owned and operated restaurants today after decades, it's something I would definitely be doing, but it's worth checking out. So check it out. jointhebirthdayclub.com/birthdayrockstar.
Thanks for listening to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. For lots of great resources, head over to restaurantrockstars.com. See you next time.